Good morning and welcome to Christ Church. If we have any visitors today, we certainly want to make you feel welcome, and please join us after church for refreshments and some fellowship and just get to know the congregation. They'd love to get to know you. I'm Cindy Campbell. I'm here. Alistair is on vacation this week, so I'll be taking the service. I would like to say I'm not generally on the emails that talk about people who are ill or in need. So if you know anybody, we have some beautiful flowers. And one of the ministries that we do in Christ Church is we deliver flowers to people who are either ill or suffering or have had, some kind of, just need a little bit of joy and light in their lives. So please, if you know anybody, please let me know after the service so that we can make sure that we can deliver some of these flowers to them and add some joy to their life and to their world during their challenging time. I also want to thank all the members of our congregation who came out yesterday for the Peace Walk in Warwick and Pembroke. We had a good turnout, and this is a coalition. Christ Church is part of it. We are trying to make changes in our community. So this is part of our mission of the church, is to become a church not only in the community but for the community. And that's actually showing our actual support for these efforts to try to make our world better right here in Bermuda. Many of you may or may not have heard Malawi was hit by a cyclone. Unfortunately, it was hit twice. It went through, turned around, and then came right back. And as you know, we've supported Bermuda Overseas Missions multiple times to do multiple builds there. And so the community where we actually build homes was one of those that was severely damaged during that period of time. So please keep them in their prayers. None of our houses fell, so that's really good, but they have had landslides and they've lost most of their crops and severe damage and, unfortunately, significant numbers of deaths. So keep that community in your hearts and prayers because we've, supported them for many times. I think that is all the announcements for today. Alistair will be returning next week. I would like to point out once again, we have the Warwick Alliance Lenten services. This is another way to show that we are of the community and part of the Christian community in Warwick. So please, if you can, come out on Tuesday night. The next meeting will be at 7:30 at New Nehemiah Church. And so we will, and that is all the churches in Warwick joined together for that event. So please, if you can, join that on Tuesday night. And now let us join together in our call to worship. Come, let us gather.
In the presence of God and one another.
Come, let us gather.
And worship God our Maker.
Come, let us gather.
We open our hearts to God.
Our first hymn is actually going to be hymn number 14. It's the same psalm, the Lord's my shepherd, but it's to a tune you're more familiar with. So hymn number 14.
Amen.
Please join me in our prayer of approach and confession. Let us pray. O God of desert prophets and unlikely messiahs, humble us. Show us that there is more to see than what we look for, more possibility, more love, more forgiveness. Restore in our sight so that we may see you in each other and in ourselves. We confess that much of what we see in life is determined by what we already believe. We confess that we look for confirmation of what we already think is true. Christ, be our light. Shine in our hearts. Shine in our darkness. Christ, be our light and shine in this church gathered today. God, enlighten us to see that there is more to see in ourselves than just what we look for. There is more to see in our enemies than just what we look for. There is more to see in this country than just what we look for. Lord, help us to stop looking for affirmation of what we already believe, and instead help us to see the world and others and ourselves through your eyes, through the eyes of a God who loves all of it madly. When we fail to see your world, others, or ourselves as you see us, forgive us, Lord. Christ, be our light. Shine in our hearts. Shine in our darkness. Be our light. Shine in your church gathered today. Amen. Do we have any kids here today? Would you like to come down with me? Come for a little talk? Good morning. Good morning. How are you? So, do you know what this month is? Do you know what we're celebrating this month? We're celebrating women. So we had International Women's Day, and this is International Women's Month. And we're celebrating women for all that they actually brought and have done in the world, because oftentimes in the past, it wasn't recognized very much. And for all my British friends, happy Mothering Sunday. Today's Mother's Day in the UK, and aren't you lucky you get to celebrate it twice, because then you'll celebrate it again when the US does it. So, but I'm going to tell you about a woman. Her name was Maria Miriam, and she lived a long time ago. She was born in 1647, so that's actually just a little bit after Bermuda was discovered and colonized, so that's a long time ago, right? So unlike most of the girls in that time, women weren't expected to do very much. They were supposed to look pretty, and they would do some needlework, and they might play a pianoforte, which was before we got pianos, it was called a pianoforte, and then they were supposed to have kids. That was pretty much their role in life, right? Well, Maria was different. She liked bugs. Do you like bugs? You like bugs? Yes? No? Yes? Yes? How about you? Do you like bugs? Maybe? Okay. Anybody know what a person who likes bugs and studies bugs is called? It's a big word, begins with an N, entomologist. So that's a person who likes bugs, but they didn't have anything called an entomologist way back then, because do you know where people thought bugs came from? They thought they just sprung out of the mud and dying plants and dying things. They thought they just kind of generated, and they thought they were from the devil. They thought they were evil. So they didn't like bugs. But Maria, she liked bugs. And so she used to study bugs, and she was a very good artist, and she could draw really well. And so she started to really look at bugs, and she would watch them from the very time they were just like eggs on a leaf until they hatched and they turned into things. And she would draw pictures of the plant that they were on, and then she would draw pictures of the different stages of life that they went through as they kind of grew. And do you know one of the things that she discovered that no one knew before? She discovered that caterpillars go into a cocoon and then come out as butterflies. So no one before that knew where butterflies came from. And she was the one who discovered that they came out as butterflies. And you know what? They ended up using a lot of what she learned and studied in medicine. Now, she never really got a whole lot of credit for any of this until just probably in the last 10 years. When they started going, yeah, but this woman did this many, many years ago. So why do you think she was able to figure out that the caterpillar turned into a butterfly? Because everybody else would have just thought that the caterpillar just kind of grew up out of the dirt. And, you know, she did it, she learned it because she really looked at it. She looked at it in a different way than anyone else had looked at it before. And that's actually what we're going to learn about today when the grown-ups read their Bible study. They're going to learn about people who actually don't really see things because they already think they know it, and they don't look, and they don't see it in a new way. And that was her big thing. She saw things in a new way because she was willing to really look at it. Okay? Let's have a prayer for our children. Lord God, as our children go into CCY, we ask your blessings on them, this week, and we ask that you allow them to really see your beautiful nature and world around us. In your name we pray. Amen. Thank you very much. And you can go back to your mamas and dads, and our next hymn is going to be hymn number 543, Christ Be Our Light. And in case there's any confusion, our younger children will go on to CCY, and we'll now have our scripture reading.
This morning's reading is from the Gospel of St. John, chapter 9, verses 1 to 41. You'll find this on page 102 in the Pew Bibles. Jesus heals a man born blind. Now, you'll notice we have recruited a few neighbors, Pharisees, and a blind man to help us with this passage. They will amplify the conversations that unfold. Reading from verse 1. As Jesus was walking along, he saw a man who had been born blind. His followers asked him, "Teacher, whose sin caused this man to be born blind, his own sin or his parents' sin?" Jesus answered, "It is not this man's sin or his parents' sin that made him blind. This man was born blind so that God's power could be shown in him. While it is daytime, we must continue doing the work of the one who sent me. The night is coming, and no one can work at night. While I am in the world, I am the light of the world." After Jesus said this, he spit on the ground and made some mud with it. He put the mud on the man's eyes. Then he told the man, "Go and wash in the pool of Siloam." Siloam means sent. So the man went to the pool. He washed and came back, and he was able to see.
Look, is this the same man who always sits and begs?
Yes, he is the one.
No, he's not the same man. He only looks like him.
I am the man.
What happened? How did you get your sight?
The man named Jesus made some mud and put it on my eyes. Then he told me to go to Siloam and wash. So I went and washed and came back seeing.
Where is this man?
I do not know.
Then the people took to the Pharisees the man who had been blind, because the day Jesus had made mud and healed his eyes was the Sabbath. The Pharisees' response:
How did you get your sight?
He put mud on my eyes, I washed, and now I can see.
This healer does not keep the Sabbath day. He is not from God.
But a man who is a sinner can't do miracles like this.
They could not agree with each other and asked the man again.
What do you say about him? It was your eyes he opened.
He's a prophet.
They did not believe that he had been blind and could now see again, so they sent for the man's parent.
Is this your son? You say he was born blind. Then how does he see now?
We know that this is our son, and we know he was born blind, but we don't know how he can see now. We don't know who opened his eyes. Ask him. He is old enough to answer for himself.
His parents said this because they were afraid of the Jews. The Jews had already decided that anyone who said that Jesus was the Christ would be put out of the synagogue. So for the second time, they called the man who had been blind.
You should give God the glory by telling the truth. We know that this man is a sinner.
I do not know if he is a sinner, but one thing I do know, I was blind and now I can see.
What did he say? What did he do to you? How did you do that again?
I don't know it. Wait. I have already told you that, but you will not listen to me. Why do you want to hear it again? Do you want to become his followers too?
You are his follower. We are followers of Moses. We know that God spoke to Moses, but we don't even know where this man comes from.
This is very strange things. You don't know where he comes from, and yet he opened my eyes. We all know that God does not listen to sinners, but God listens to anyone who worships and obeys him. Nobody has ever heard of anybody giving sight to a blind man. If this man were not from God, he could do nothing.
You were born full of sin. Are you trying to teach us? Leave.
Spiritual blindness. Jesus heard that they had thrown him out, so he found him and said, "Do you believe in the Son of Man?"
Who is the Son of Man, sir? Tell me so I can believe in him.
You have already seen him. The Son of Man is the one talking with you now.
Yes, Lord, I believe.
I came into the world so that the world could be judged. I came so that the blind could see, and so that those who see will become blind.
What? Are you saying that we are blind too?
If you were really blind, you would not be guilty of sin. But now that you say you can see, your guilt remains. May the Lord add his blessing to the understanding of this passage, and may his name be all praise and glory. Amen.
Thank you, everyone. Our hymn of preparation is hymn number 135, O Laughing Light, O Firstborn of Creation. Speaking and in the hearing, be acceptable in your sight. Amen. Very few of us will have ever experienced anything like the blind man, the total absence of one of our senses. It's rather hard to imagine what exactly it's like for that person who is deaf or blind or in some way impactfully incapacitated. I can remember communicating with my mom, who was suffering from ALS, or motor neuron disease. We would have painfully slow conversations because she had to spell out each word on a voice synthesizer that was on her wheelchair. What I do remember her telling me is how lonely she felt when people talked over her or acted as if she wasn't there because she couldn't communicate. Maybe people were uncomfortable because of the wheelchair. Maybe they were uncomfortable because she was on a respirator that helped her breathe. But whatever the reason, most often the way they responded was they just didn't see her. It was as if they selectively could see what was right in front of them. They would talk over her or about her to my dad as if she wasn't sitting right there in front of him. And mentally, Mom was all there, but she just couldn't communicate. But even before she lost her voice, when she was still able to speak, but because she was in a wheelchair, people would still address Dad and not her. But as the vocal cords deteriorated, she became more ignored. And most times, people even seemed to make a great effort not to make eye contact with her. It's not uncommon for those who live with a variety of disabilities to have similar experiences. They understand the feeling of being rendered invisible, to be ignored, to not have a voice, or to be considered less than whole somehow. So I love how this passage starts. Jesus saw the blind man. They're walking down the road, and Jesus saw the blind man. How many other people walked down that same road and walked right past that blind beggar and never saw him that day? John's gospel is clearly using physical blindness to highlight spiritual blindness. And the dialogue starts with that age-old question that people still propagate today. Jesus' disciples ask that one question the blind man must have heard 1,000 times. Whose fault is it? Or as the disciples asked, who sinned? Someone must have done something wrong for God to inflict this type of disability on him. The disciples see him through first century lens of shame. But unfortunately, we still have people that think that same way today. The cyclone in Malawi was caused by somebody did something wrong, or the earthquakes. They make it a cause and effect. I wonder what the blind man thought when the disciples asked that. He might have been thinking, well, I wonder what this one's going to say, or what his answer will be to this question that he's heard so often. Whose fault is it? But Jesus answers matter-of-factly and directly. No one sinned. There is no cause and effect. Now, that's obviously a paraphrase, but my paraphrase is actually closer in intent to the Greek than our English translation. Most of the translation that we're familiar with state that he was born blind so that God's work might be revealed in him. I don't know about you, but that phrase is really difficult for me to comprehend and understand. How could God purposely make someone disabled so that he could prove something? You know, I remember when we were living in North Carolina in a small community, our small community experienced a school shooting, and several students were killed and a resource officer was killed. And at this time, 25 years ago, this was not, as it is today, a common occurrence. And it shocked us all to the core. And there was this common phrase that was bandied about the community, primarily by Christians. It was God's will. And I will never forget our minister standing up in the pulpit on that Sunday with a breaking voice stating clearly and definitively, this was not God's will. God did not will for those children to die. And this passage actually affirms that message. God does not will innocent people to die, just as God does not will illness or cancer or dementia or any other tragedy that befalls people. So how do we handle that phrase, he was born blind so that? It doesn't feel right. Well, it isn't right. The Greek text does not include the phrase, he was born blind. It was added by translators into English to try to make the Greek sentence make sense in our language. But the literal translation says, neither did this one sin, nor his parents, but in order that the works of God, neither did this one sin, nor his parents, but in order that the works of God should be manifest in him, it is essential for me to work the works of the one who sent me while it is day. The night is coming when no one is able to work. See, Greek doesn't have periods and it doesn't have commas. And so the translators put the period after he was born blind, after he didn't sin and his parents didn't sin, full stop. But then they put in that extra little phrase. But I think the phrase would be better said, in order that the works of God should be manifest in him, it is essential for me to work the works of the one who sent me while it is day. The night is coming when no one is able to work. I think Jesus is essentially stating that it's not a question about consequence or hereditary sin, but the man's blindness is an opportunity to participate in the works of God as a community together. It's a call to take action. We can manifest God's work, God's love, in a way, the way we respond to people. That's the way we respond to people who have disabilities or who are suffering tragedies. That is how we can manifest God's work. And it's the duty of all of us who are appointed in the world to accomplish the work of God. In the chapter right before this reading today, Jesus spoke those wonderful and words that we all hold so closely in our hearts. I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will never walk in darkness, but will have light, the light of life. And throughout the Gospel of John, light is a metaphor for sight, for revelation, for spiritual illumination, and for Jesus himself. And in this passage, I believe that Jesus is demonstrating what being God's light means. After he declared that no one sinned, he bent down, made mud paste, and smeared it on the man's eyes, and told him to go wash in the pool of Siloam. This pool was generally used by pilgrims to the temple in Jerusalem. It was where they would go for ritual purification. Now, it was surprising that what Jesus did, first, because he put mud in the guy's eyes with no explanation. But second, the blind man never asked to be healed. He never asked for Jesus' help. Given that blind man's reality, that daily reality, you could almost say that one of the most important acts of healing that Jesus did, even more than responding to providing his sight, was that Jesus saw him. That was the first thing. And then he empowered him. He said, go, wash in the pool of Siloam. And the man was able to become an actor in his own life again, rather than depending on others. With hands guiding him to the water, the man immediately did what Jesus said. He went, he washed, he saw, and everything changed. Sort of. Because then we move on to the next passage. And the focus of our story turns to the reaction of people around him to his regained sight. What becomes pretty apparent is that for those around the man, little changed. Not only did they not see him when he was blind, they don't see him now that he can see. The neighbors had trouble recognizing him. They argue whether it's the same man. They never really saw him, and now they don't want to recognize the change in him. But he said, I am the man. And he explained how he was healed by Jesus. But the neighbors still had their doubts, and so they marched him over to where the Pharisees were. And this is where we get another twist in the story, because here is where we hear that Jesus healed him on the Sabbath. So Sabbath healings were only permitted in life and death situations, and that certainly wasn't the situation in this case because he'd been blind from birth. So the first question the Pharisees asked was a matter of technique. How did he do this? And then the man explained. And then the next thing they move on to were the moral implications. One of the religious leaders says, how can this be a man of God? He sinned. He didn't honor the Sabbath. He's a sinner. And another Pharisee goes, but how can anybody heal if God didn't provide him that power? So in a really unusual move, the religious leaders turn and now ask this newly empowered man, who they formerly considered unclean and who would have been barred from temple for some unknown sin which had caused his blindness, who he thinks Jesus was. And what we see is this newly empowered blind man's spiritual knowledge is literally growing between scenes in this reading. He moves from just knowing the name of Jesus, his name is Jesus, to proclaiming him a prophet. But unsatisfied that the story's true, the religious leader then called the parents. And the parents come and they confirm his identity and they confirm that he was born blind, but they say they don't know who had healed him. Now, here once again, our translations say the Jews, they were afraid of the Jews. And, once again, this is where, unfortunately, John's gospel has been used for anti-Semitic reasons. But when they talk about the Jews, they're talking about the religious institution, not individual people. And the church, or the synagogue, basically had, at the time of John's writing, had basically said if you were a Christian, you were no longer eligible to come into the temple. So what the gospel writer is basically saying, the parents were afraid to say anything because they would have been thrown out of the temple themselves. So they just basically say he was born blind. They don't say anything else. And then they say, but he's of age, you can ask him. So the religious leaders call the blind man back, and they try to get him to confirm a moral code that they lived by, which defined sin as working on the Sabbath as defined in Scripture. And they wanted the blind man to name Jesus a sinner because he violated the Sabbath. Now, we can be hard on the Pharisees. We can say, how closed-minded were they? But I can actually think of many disagreements we have had within the Christian church on what is moral and correct spiritual behavior based upon biblical interpretations. I can think of lots of situations where the literal or selective reading of a Bible would have precluded many of the changes made in the Church of Scotland in the last 60 to 65 years. For example, the Church of Scotland only allowed divorcees to remarry starting in 1959. The church only allowed women elders to be ordained starting in 1966. They only allowed women ministers to become ordained in 1968. In 2013, they allowed for LGBT ministers in civil unions to hold office. And in 2022, the church has just allowed for same-sex marriage. Each one of those changes can be argued against based on very selective scripture passages. And to this day, to avoid conflict, the Church of Scotland allows congregations to determine whether they will follow this broadening of inclusion within the church. So as we celebrate Women's Month, there are still Church of Scotland congregations that will not ordain women elders, and there's still Church of Scotland congregations that will not accept a woman minister. But Jesus, I think, in this passage demonstrates that we have to be willing to change our historical interpretations if they interfere with bringing God's kingdom to here on earth. What happens if we don't change? Well, we may respond like the Pharisees. They recalled the blind man, and regardless of what they saw with their own eyes, they still believed in their spiritual eyes that the man was entirely of sin. They can't release their historical prejudices and beliefs that allow God to expand his vision of inclusion that was clearly demonstrated by Jesus this day. Ultimately, the religious leaders got mad. They banned the blind man. They tossed him out of the fellowship of the synagogue. And they grew angry not only because Jesus broke the rules by healing the man on the Sabbath, but he messed with their sense of control by taking this man, previously unseen and dismissed because of his supposed sin, and forced them to acknowledge not only the man's existence, but the grace of God and the inclusiveness of God to those who were previously considered unworthy. Throughout this story, we watch as that formerly blind man continues to grow in his understanding, to continue to process what happened to him. And he moves from that invisible, silent beggar, and he forces people to see them. He lectures the Pharisees. He points out how their understanding is flawed, and their response is to ban him from synagogue. But he's not left alone. The passage ends with Jesus seeking him out. He finds the man who, at this time, must be terrified that once again he will be alone and unseen. But Jesus doesn't leave him alone. He makes the effort to reach out to the man. And in the final section of the story, we watch as this man, knowing that he is seen by Jesus, complete his own spiritual journey and recognizing the light of the divinity of Christ. Jesus has literally and spiritually brought light to this man's darkness. In the last few sentences of the passage, Jesus sets a standard that still holds true today. If you are blind or unaware of some injustice, you have not sinned by not acknowledging or addressing it. If you don't know about it, it's not a sin. But if you have seen injustice or wrong and still do nothing, that is a sin. Jesus demonstrates that we are meant to be involved in God's work, bringing justice, peace, and love to the world. And it's essential for us to work the works of God while we can. We are meant to speak out, to support through prayer, to support through encouragement, or to support through our actions. Now, I'm not saying that every person has to be involved in every cause and every thing that goes wrong in the world. But there are many ways to support. In our prayers, we support. We pray every Sunday, "Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven." And Jesus demonstrates that we are to join together to bring the kingdom of God to earth. But what's not acceptable is to pretend not to see. Amen. Our hymn of reflection is hymn number 623, "Here in this place, a new light is streaming." Now, this is a new hymn, but it only has 2 musical phrases, so it's easy to learn. And we will be singing verses 1, 2, and 4. Hymn number 623, "Here in this place, new light is streaming."
Now is the door
Please join me now for our prayer of thanksgiving and our prayer of intercession. Let us pray. Lord, we give you thanks that here in this place today and every day, a new light is streaming. Here in this place today and every day, you banish darkness and bring your light. Thank you for giving us a glimpse of your vision of the world, for opening our eyes to the magnificence of your love and grace. Lord God, we ask for your care and compassion for ourselves, our loved ones, and all those in our world who need to see the light of your love today. We ask that you bless all those trying to bring peace to our island through community activities and support for each other. God of stillness, bless those whose lives are in turmoil, who seek restoration, quiet their anxieties, still their fears. Let them feel the comforting warmth of your life. We especially ask your blessing on our friends in Malawi who have lost their homes and crops and family members. God of deliverance, bless those who are searching for a pathway through the current challenges of their lives. Lead them through their dark times. Protect them from that which would hurt them. Direct them in their decision-making. Let them see the brightness of your light on the pathway of their lives. God of abiding love, bless those who need a safe dwelling place, a place that brings hope and quiet and peace to those who are grieving and those who need respite. Let your life enlighten every corner and dwelling place. You have offered to us all our lives a safe place, bathed in your light. God of the future, present, and past, we remember all our loved ones that are no longer here today. May we never think them far away, for we share a fellowship and a communion with them still through the mystery and fellowship of the communion we have with you. We ask all these prayers in the light of your life, the light of your world. Amen. Your offering will now be accepted. Let us pray. God, we offer these our gifts of time, talents, and treasures to work toward bringing your light into the world. We join together now, saying the prayer you taught us. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. Our closing hymn is hymn number 352, "Oh, for a Thousand Tongues to Sing." May Christ be our light, so we may see. May Christ shine in our hearts, so we may feel. May Christ shine through the darkness, so we are empowered. Shine in your church as we are gathered today. And may the blessing of God, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit be with you all, now and forevermore.